So we were Ofsteded in October, and maths was deep dived as one of the subjects. We were deep dived as the subject that needed attention because some previous years sixth form value added was lower than we would have wanted. Our sixth form value added, generally we should expect to get almost straight A's based upon GCSE, and it's very hard to maintain those results. So it's a standing thing with kind of grammar schools in general, Key Stage 5 value added, and making sure that it's positive. So anyway, over the day they came, they chatted with me. That was the first thing. They did paired observations, work scrutiny, then they did more observations, there was a staff panel, and then there was time for further investigation, and that was posted before the day, so I knew that would happen. So I'll kind of break up those things and say what each element was and any kind of reflection. So the first one was the chat with me, and it was a maths specialist that came. He was a very nice man, and we kind of had a lot in common, and he wasn't in any way intrusive or anything that he did, but it was a good dialogue. Really, he wanted to know how the curriculum had been developed. That was kind of the first thing, and how we moved from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3, Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4, and Key Stage 4 to Key Stage 5, and how it built. And he kind of just let me lead the narrative on it, so I was very happy with that. He wanted specifically on how things were taught, and where and why. A lot of the work that we do is kind of based on some work by a chap called John Mason. My predecessor, I think, based a lot of the curriculum on things from him, but since then, when I've kind of tried to put more meat to the bones, I've actually cited some various references from him, just because it's full of articles and stuff that I really think that I want the department to read and be aware of, on good teaching. So yeah, I think just actually having names connected with what and something to validate where the curriculum has come from and why probably gives it a lot of weight. He didn't delve too deeply into it, but I don't think for our school, in any case, saying that we have bought a curriculum and we just use that in exactly its thing would have worked. I think having a bought curriculum and adapting it would have been fine. Really wanted that base. So we wanted to know about consistency and our schemes of learning, which I was very keen to show, and I wanted to show him the bits that I was most kind of proud about. I think that was the bits that are fully formed, and with all our schemes of learning and curriculum planning, they're works in progress, and some bits are better than other bits. We put a lot of investment into bits that I felt would have high impact: our early algebra, our early number, and then topics which run through our scheme, like coordinate geometry. Each year gets repeated and built on. There are other elements that were less well developed. So we talked about that. The thing that I knew was going to be discussed was the Key Stage 5, because that was the reason why maths was chosen for the deep dive, and he would have looked at the data. So I brought it up first of all, and I'll kind of share how my articulation on that changed over the kind of previous year. I did a deep dive the previous year where it was brought up, and I was quite defensive about it, because actually our Key Stage 5 results in many respects were very good. We had, I think, a third of the whole school's A stars were from the maths department. We had lots and lots of really pleasing outcomes, but we did have some students who really underperformed and were targeted A's and got far less than that, and that's why our value added was low. So I took advice on that, and I kind of learned from my mistakes before, and I didn't argue this time round. I said that I aspire that every student in Key Stage 5 gets an A star, and I wouldn't be satisfied until they were ready to do that. And by kind of putting a sky is the limit goal, I think that pleased him quite a lot, and I was able to cite quite a lot of things that I'd done to try and focus on our Key Stage 5 results. Most of those are quite small tweaking elements, bits of the curriculum we've changed, assessment procedures that we've kind of tightened up on, ways to kind of scrutinise and share work. But I think he was very happy that I brought it up. And he was quite happy with my responses, and there was in no way any kind of argument about it, because I kind of put my cards on the table from the beginning and wasn't defensive as I'd been in the past. And I think I'd probably pick things from my curriculum in future deep dives that I'm looking to develop and talk about those, rather than let them be brought up and then kind of be on a back foot. So that was our chat. That lasted over an hour, to be fair. It was quite lengthy, and then we went and did our learning walks. So I wanted to share with you a document here, which I would highly advocate, and I will gladly share with you if that's useful. This performer here, I've used it, so I've used it 3 times with the department, and it's a 10-minute form that every member of the department fills in prior to a learning walk, which is kind of a deep dive session, not just learning walks. So the first one, I want to know the teacher, what day it is, because if it's 2-day inspection or a deep dive, then we know what it is. So I need to know what everyone's teaching for every period of the day. When are they free, and what are the main topics? So I needed to know that, what they're teaching and where it lies in the scheme of work. So that was a really simple thing for everyone to jot that down, give me that information and tell me where it is. I wanted a comment from everyone's marking trends, and if there were any abnormalities in the class, and I'm quite aware that there are always abnormalities in marking. Our big one when the Ofsted was on was year 11, because we do past papers, but I needed to know that from classes that were visited, that if marking was, say, remotely, or if marking was on Google Classroom rather than in books, then I can talk about that, and that people kind of pull all their books the day before and try and mark them and up to date. That's a waste of time. But me knowing what the marking trend was kind of quite useful. So the next one is, in the classes, I was able to take the inspector to students to talk to and show the inspector students' work, and I wanted articulate students. So I wanted from each class students that represent it well, preferably high and low ability ones, some with pupil premium SEN and joiner students. That wasn't actually asked for at all, but I felt, for me as a curriculum leader, to know the class when I'm going in, that was useful information. So I got that from every single class that was taught, some students who would represent it well. And then in some classes we've got students with, I don't know, anxiety issues, or some students who've been away for long periods of time due to very legitimate reasons, and some students I wouldn't want to put under any pressure, so I wanted to know those students in each class. So again, this was an opportunity for each of the 6 lessons over the day for the teacher to give me a list of those students, and I told the inspector not to talk to this student because they've got anxiety or various reasons, and I felt that knowing the class well was something that the inspector appreciated that I could do as curriculum leader. This is more of a prompt really, but it's for the teacher to have the seating plan already, which we do on a programme Go for Schools. But I obviously needed to have that, and then is there any additional information? So I've used that 3 times now for deep dives, and the third one was the Ofsted, and I found that probably the most useful thing from the department, because I felt like I knew everything that was going on that day, including clubs and things at lunchtime. He wanted to know if there were any clubs on, and there were. So there's any extra things to note about the day. So so that was really useful, and I'd advocate that. So coming back to the next thing, so it was the observations. Then we went in. So before every single observation, we stopped outside, and I told him what I would expect to see in that class during that lesson, and then basically we went in, and we could discuss whether or not that was the case or not, and for the most part it was. So I was pleased by that. But I knew what books to show him, what students to go to, and I had an annotated seating plan with some of that information on for each of the classes. So I was able to go in and seem like I knew what I was doing a little bit. He asked the students some quite deep questions. So one of the questions that he asked in year 9, it was a trigonometry lesson, is what sine of x means, what does it represent? And he wanted to see that it was a ratio. But he was looking for kind of deep understanding, and he went into an A-level lesson on trig identities, and again he was kind of quizzing them on quite deep things, which I thought was good. And he came to the idea that our students could do the work really well, but they didn't always understand it, which I thought was actually quite perceptive and quite true. And again, it was nice to be able to agree with him. And show him in our curriculum planning how we try and develop understanding further. So, so that was there. So, and then after the lesson, we had a chat, and I was quite critical, and I thought that was quite good, really. Rather, thought he liked the fact that I was able to come out of every lesson and say things that I liked and didn't like. It kind of shows high expectations for the department in the way that I want it, and those expectations are there. But he was quite happy with the observations I'd made, and in 2 occasions he wouldn't have been happy with the lesson, but I was able to preempt and to say I really didn't like it for this reason, and show him in the curriculum planning what should have been seen. And again, he was very happy with that. So if you've got members of staff, I suppose that you're a bit more worried about, I think it can be turned to a positive, that if the inspector goes in and sees that the member of staff's being supported and that you are giving the direction that they need, then I think that can be a positive thing. So then we did the work scrutiny. There was lots and lots of books and files that I had ready. I'd asked for them the day before. I'd emailed the students I wanted, and I had lots and lots of files. And I showed him our Google Classroom as well. I must be honest, he didn't really seem that interested in it. I think perhaps because I showed him and I was quite clear that he didn't really need to see anything more. He was more interested in talking to the students and observing the lessons. So then he did a bit more observation and tried to kind of get some extra bits and pieces. He then went to the staff panel, and I wasn't present for that. So he talked to my team basically about whether the things that I'd said, were they true, were they being done, and I was kind of quite pleased that they agreed with me and they correlated. And he said that he didn't want to do any further investigation for maths, and he was quite pleased with it. So, so that was really pleasing. So I'll just that was our experience really of it. But I will say the things that as a curriculum leader I would do again on notice, so that it's there. So if I got notice that in 2 days' time I had an Ofsted or a deep dive for that matter, I've got a briefing document, and I will share that with you. I had this ready in advance from a deep dive, and it basically tells my department what I want them to do. So you can kind of see things. So I wanted them to be transparent. I wanted them to know what was going on over the day. I also wanted them to know our curriculum intent, and so I've given them the structure, and I've given them links to our curriculum intent. That's you can see it's highlighted there, and there's a link to our learning walk self-review that I wanted them to fill in and give me as soon as they possibly could. And certain things that's there that we didn't need lesson plans. So, and also I've written, and I really was keen that we don't do anything that differs greatly from the usual. Our curriculum planning is what we must always follow and should look to implement. So I was really quite keen that people didn't do anything that they weren't comfortable with. The seating plans, I talked about that quite a bit, and checking that the lesson came from our scheme of learning. And if anything in our scheme of learning wasn't good that was being taught on the day, maybe because of COVID, maybe we needed to update it, that was a simple job I could do in the evening. But everything's mirror the schemes of learning and the kind of written documentation for the lessons. how I can access mark books, and some key things that have come up from our previous deep dives that have been spanned out for us. Assessment for learning was one of them, and contextualization of math. Sometimes we've been quite abstract, and I think especially if it's not math specialist watchings, they've looked for contextualization and asked for it. So we tried to put that in where we could. And then our departmental priorities that I wanted the department to know, so that in that question at the end, when they're kind of quizzed, they're able to articulate what our big priorities were for that year. And also for our A-level, which was going to be there, what things we'd done to try and drive our A-level performance on. So that was all ready and it needed tweaking. And I shared that with my team. So that was the first thing. Fill in the learning worksheets. So that was the department. I kind of stress, don't argue with the inspectors, because sometimes, I don't know, people can disagree with ideas that are being insinuated, and I didn't think that would be helpful. Making sure that staff knew their pupil premium and send students really well, which I thought was mindful. In the end, they weren't actually quizzed on that, but they have in a previous learning walks. So the work scrutiny and the books, then I would collect. So this is all stuff I'm doing prior to it. Immediately need to tell the students to bring their books, because you want to have those ready on the day and you don't want to be chasing them on the day. If there's anything in the scheme of learning that's not up to date, to put some final tweaks on that, but obviously there's no point in rewriting anything on short notice. It's just little tweaks to make sure that for the lessons that day, the scheme of learning is clear so that staff can teach it. And having any documents to hand, and that was it, which has differed very much from previous Ofsted inspections I've had, where I think the day before I was doing lesson plans and I was planning lessons and I was marking books. So that kind of culture has gone. On the second day, if he wanted to see me, he could have, but he didn't want to see me. He was happy with the department. So that's my experience of Ofsted this year. It may not be general to everyone, but I hope that's useful if anyone else needs to prepare for that, or indeed for a learning walk or a deep dive from any other body.